Anyways. Part 1 was called Festival Night, and it was about a party. 80 years after Mars was founded. No, I don't know. A couple years after the first city is built, which is like a big thing. I'm sure it took a couple decades. 20 years, maybe? I don't know. Then we go back in time, all the way to the beginning, which is part 2, the voyage out. So as you can imagine, part 2 is about leaving Earth and going to Mars, which is exactly where we left off. They got into orbit around Mars, and everybody has to split up and go do their separate jobs because they're the first 100 people to go to Mars. Okay, Roar. I'm not even sure if it can be counted as a flashback. It was more like the intro to the book was a flash forward. Because I think most of the book is going to be like... Well, no, I don't know. We're not that far into it, so... Like, the very first part of the book was like this much. And then this is all part 2. You know? So I don't know if it counts as a flashback anymore. It's just like where we are now. There's like 3 major characters. Oh no, there's more than that. Fuck. Oh, my least favorite part of Monday Book Club is the weekly summary and reading the minutes from the last book club. So there's this guy, right? He was a boy, she was a girl, and then boy, like, kind of, fumbled the bag, and the girl got creeped out by him, and then the girl, started seeing the other boy, who was a boy, and they're, like, frenemies. You know, like, the boys are, like, frenemies. Like, they couldn't be where they are without each other, but they're also kind of, like, you know. So, that's those people. Wow. I think this is my worst summary yet. Any questions? They're the leaders of the US and Russian factions. There's, like, mostly US and Russians going. Americans, you know. There's a couple smaller, like, specialized, groups, like Hiroko. She's from Japan, if it wasn't obvious. And she, like, runs the farms. She's got, she's, like, some bioengineering genius or some shit. She's, like, on the farm. And there's Maya. She's Maya Toyatanova. Twatnova, as we know her. Maya Twatnova. She's, like, in charge of the Russian side, even though they kind of, like, don't believe in the hierarchy. And then on the American side, where they believe in hierarchy very seriously, there is Frank Chalmers. And he may or may not have started a race war / riot. On the festival night 30 years in the future. So, the leader of the American, the leader of the Russian, like, she's a sexy lady, he's a handsome man, and they're both in charge, so they're like, oh, it's not, we can have sex, right? And then Frank's, like, kind of, like, weird and he weirds Maya out. So then Maya's like, I think it's an end to our fling. And then everybody else like on the ship is like gossiping and having sex with each other, and people think Hiroko is running a male harem and that she's saving her eggs so that she can like repopulate Mars. That's just normal office gossip on the spaceship to Mars. And then Maya, she starts getting sexy with John. And John is a very cool guy. He is the frenemy of Frank. Frank's kind of like the brains. John is like the face. And John Boone is actually the first man on Mars. So he gets all the pussy and all the press. And Maya just fucked him. Like, that was one of the last things that happened, too. Maya fucks John in the fucking bubble dome. And now they're like a power couple. And now they're on Mars. Now they've reached Mars. They spent like 8 months in a spaceship like the size of a hotel, like a big city hotel. And then they're gonna get into orbit around Mars, and they're gonna start taking apart the ship and turning the components into landers, and they're landing on Mars now to go start laying the foundations for the first settlement. The Tauruses are being dissembled. Sorry. Part 3, Crucible. Let me scooch right up. I'm probably forgetting something, but we'll find out. It formed with the rest of the solar system around 5 billion years ago. That's 15 million human generations. Rocks banging together in space, and then coming back and holding together. All because of the mysterious force we call gravity. That same mysterious warp in the weft of things caused the pile of rocks, when it was big enough, to crush in on its center until the heat of the pressure melted the rock. Mars is small but heavy, with a nickel-iron core. It is small enough that the interior has cooled faster than Earth's. The core no longer spins inside the crust at a different speed, and so Mars has practically no magnetic field. No dynamo left. But one of the last internal flows of the molten core and mantle was in the form of a huge anomalous lump, lumping outward on one side. Oh my god, I can't fucking read. Mars has practically no magnetic field. It's got no riz. But one of the last internal flows of the molten core and mantle was in the form of a huge anomalous lumping outward on one side. A shove against the crust wall that formed a continent-sized bulge, 11 kilometers high, 3 times as high as the Tibetan Plateau is above its surroundings. This bulge caused many other features to appear. a system of radial fractures covering an entire hemisphere, including the largest cracks of all, the Valles Marineris, a lace of canyons that would cover the United States coast to coast. The bulge also caused a number of volcanoes, including 3 straddling its spine: Ascraeus Mons, Pavonis Mons, and Arsia Mons. Pavonis Mons is the largest volcano in the solar system. Or it's the highest mountain in this whole solar system. Yeah, something like that. I've forgotten all of my fun facts. Fun fact. I've forgotten all of my fun facts. Yeah, you could say they're monster volcanoes. The bulge also caused a number of volcanoes, including the 3 straddling its spine: Ascraeus Mons, Pavonis Mons, and Arsia Mons. And off on its northwest edge, Olympus Mons. I'm so stupid. See, literally forgot every fact I've ever learned, and I have made myself stupid. It was Olympus Mons the whole time. Okay, I'm just gonna stop saying things. Can't be wrong if never speak. It's not the weed, I know, it's the alcohol. And the fact that I don't study astronomy at all anymore. But I'd rather beat myself up over it, so it's because I'm stupid. Olympus Mons. It's literally written. Okay, let me read this as is. The bulge also caused a number of volcanoes, blah blah blah, Ascraeus, Pavonis, Arsia, and off its northwest edge, Olympus Mons, the tallest mountain in the solar system. 3 times the height of Everest. 100 times the mass of Mauna Loa. 100 times the mass of Mauna Loa, the Earth's largest volcano. That's why they called it Olympus Mons. Yeah, that's why it's easy to remember. The Tharsis, the Tharsis Bulge. The Tharsis Bulge was the most important factor in shaping the surface of Mars. The other major factor was meteor fall. In the Noachian Age, 3 to 4 billion years ago, millions of meteors were falling on Mars at a tremendous rate. Tharsis. Like catharsis, yes, actually, Tharsis. The Tharsis Bulge was the most important factor in the shaping of the surface of Mars. The other major factor was meteor fall. In the Noachian Age, 3 to 4 billion years ago, millions of meteors were falling on Mars at a tremendous rate, and thousands of them were planetesimals, rocks as big as Vega or Phobos. One of the impacts left behind Hellas Basin, 2,000 kilometers in diameter. The largest obvious crater in the solar system. Although Daedalus Planum appears to be the remains of an impact basin 4,500 kilometers across. Those are big. But then there are the archaeologists who believe that the entire northern hemisphere of Mars is actually an ancient impact basin. These big impacts created explosions so cataclysmic that it is hard to imagine them. Ejecta from them ended up on the Earth and the Moon, and as asteroids in Trojan orbits. Some archaeologists think that the Tharsis Bulge started because of the Hellas impact. Others believe that Phobos and Deimos are ejecta. And these were only the largest impacts. Smaller stones fell every day, so that the oldest surfaces on Mars are saturated with cratering. The landscape a palimpsest of newer rings obscuring older ones, with no patch of land untouched. And each of these impacts released explosions of heat that melted rock. Elements were broken out of their matrix and fired away in the form of hot gases, liquids, new minerals. This and the outgassing from the core produced an atmosphere and lots of water. There were clouds, storms, rain and snow, glaciers, streams, rivers, lakes, all scouring the land, all leaving unmistakable marks of their passage. Flood channels, stream beds, shorelines, every kind of hydrologic hieroglyphic. Make Mars Green Again, that's book 2. Far out, man. Truly is. Every kind of hydrologic hieroglyphic. But all that went away. The planet was too small, too far from the sun. The atmosphere froze and fell to the ground. Carbon dioxide sublimed to form a thin new atmosphere. While oxygen bonded to rock and turned it red. The water froze, and over the ages seeped down through the kilometers of meteor-broken rock. Eventually, this layer of regolith became permeated with ice, and the deepest parts were hot enough to melt the ice. So there were underground seas on Mars. And water always flows downhill. So these aquifers migrated down, slowly seeping until they pooled behind some stoppage or another, a rib of high bedrock or a frozen soil barrier. Sometimes intense artesian pressures built up against these dams, And sometimes a meteor would hit, or a volcano would appear, and the dam would burst apart, and a whole underground sea would spew over the landscape in enormous floods. Floods 10,000 times the flow of the Mississippi. Eventually, however, the water on the surface would freeze and sublime away in the ceaseless dry winds, and fall on the poles in every winter's fog hood. The polar caps, therefore, thickened, and their weight drove the ice underground until the visible ice was only the tip of 2 world-topping lenses of underground permafrost. Lenses 10 and then 100 times the visible cap's volume. While back down on the equator, toward the equator, new aquifers were being filled from below by outgassing from the core, and some of the old aquifers were refilling. And so, this slowest of cycles approached its second round. But as the planet was cooling, all of it happened more and more slowly, in a long retard, like a clock winding down. The planet settled into the shape we see. But change never stops. The ceaseless winds carved the land with dust that grew finer and finer. And the eccentricities of Mars' orbit meant that the southern and northern hemispheres traded the cold and warm winters in a 51,000-year cycle, so that the dry ice cap and the water ice cap reversed poles. Each swing of this pendulum laid down a new stratum of sand, and the troughs of new dunes cut through the older layers at an angle, until the sand around the poles lay in a stippled cross-hatching, in geometrical patterns like Navajo sand paintings, banding the whole top of the world. The colored sands in their patterns, the fluted and scalloped canyon walls, the volcanoes rising right through the sky. Literally, like, imagine a volcano that's so fucking big it just looks like it's going to outer space, because it literally does. Sorry. Good writing. The volcanoes rising right through the sky, the rubbled rock of the chaotic terrain, the infinity of craters, ringed emblems of the planet's beginning. Beautiful, or harsher than that, spare, austere, stripped down, silent, stoic, rocky, changeless, sublime. The visible language of nature's mineral existence. Mineral. Not animal, nor vegetable, nor viral. I feel like it's like not animal, not vegetable, nor viral. It could have happened, but it didn't. There was never any spontaneous generation out of the clays or the sulfuric hot springs. No spore falling out from space. No touch of a god. Whatever starts life, for we do not know, it did not happen on Mars. Mars rolled, proof of the otherness of the world, of its stony vitality. And then, one day, ... She hit the ground with both feet solid. Nothing tricky about it. The G familiar from 9 months on the Aries. Car alarm. She hit the ground with both feet solid. Nothing tricky about it. The G familiar from 9 months on the Aries. In the Aries. And with the suit's weight, not that much different from walking on Earth, as far as she could remember. The sky was a pink shaded with sandy tans, a color richer and more subtle than in any of the photos. Look at the sky, Anne was saying. Look at the sky. Maya was chattering away. Sax and Vlad spun like rotating statues. Nadezhda Francine Chernyshevsky. Nadezhda Francine Chernyshevsky took a few more steps. Felt her boots crunch the surface. It was salt-hardened sand, a couple of centimeters thick, which cracked when you walked on it. The geologists called it Dury crust, or caliche, or I don't know how to say this, but I feel like a mineral deposit of gravel, sand, and nitrates found especially in dry areas of South America. Caliche, okay. That is, I would not have guessed. Is the stream still here? Okay. Maya was chattering away. Sax and Vlad spun like rotating statues. Nadezhda Francine Chernyshevsky took a few more steps. Felt her boots crunch the surface. It was salt-hardened sand, a couple of centimeters thick, which cracked when you walked on it. The geologists called it Dury crust, or caliche. I already forgot how to say it. Caliche? Her boot tracks were surrounded by small systems of radial fractures. She was out, away from the lander. And there I'm going to pause because I have to pee. I'll be right back.